springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. So says Isaiah in the reading we heard today, and so also says Jesus, only not with words. It can get a bit confusing because we don't hear the story in consecutive order at this point of the year, but our reading from the Gospel of John that we just heard relates a story about a dinner at Martha, Mary, and Lazarus' house, which comes after a previous visit to the same house during which Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. That time, the first time, there were lots of people around, mourners from town mostly, grieving the passing of Lazarus. And while the extraordinary, miraculous, and likely also somewhat terrifying raising of Lazarus caused many to believe, it also served as the sort of final straw event which pushed the religious authorities into a firm plan to get rid of Jesus once and for all. Indeed, it was on hearing about the raising of Lazarus that the chief priests called an emergency meeting, and from that day on, the gospel tells us bluntly, they planned to put him to death. The time had come, it seems. The powers and principalities were amassing against him, and understanding the danger, Jesus, we're told, no longer walked about openly among the people, but went with the 12 to a town named Ephraim in the wilderness. And there he remained, in seclusion with his friends, and in prayer, we assume, and also most likely in hiding too, at least for a time. Orders had been given that anyone who knew where Jesus was should let them know so that the authorities might arrest him. And it's useful at this point, I think, especially these days, to really take a little moment and allow ourselves to take the truth of the fear in, and to imagine how the real danger he was suddenly in might have felt to Jesus and also to those who were with him. Jesus was now a hunted man, in hiding, up close to the wilderness. He has his people with him, his closest friends, and we can imagine what the conversations must have been like locked up in that house. The arguments back and forth about what to do next, the stress, the fear, the drive to strike out or to flee, or to at least take a little time to regroup. Until after a time, 6 days before the Passover, we're told, Jesus finally emerges again. But instead of retreating further out into the wilderness as most wanted people would have done, he turns instead to walk quietly towards Jerusalem and towards the death he knows awaits him there. Bethany, where Martha and Mary and Lazarus live, is just 2 miles outside of Jerusalem, so it makes sense that Jesus and the 12 would stop there on the way. It would be a safe place, they knew, or as safe as any place could be at least. And this is where the part of the story we just heard proclaimed begins. It's such an incredible scene. Jesus' first quiet, intentional steps towards his own death, taken freely and with no fanfare at all, lead him to the house of friends he can trust. He knocks on the door, and with immense courage, Martha and Mary and Lazarus welcome he and his followers in, and then set about feeding them all. Again, remember the real fear that must have been coursing through that room, and the tension birthed by the knowledge of the danger that everyone there was assuming just for being associated with this man, Jesus. The gospel says nothing about it, at least not directly, but when Mary begins to anoint Jesus, evoking his death in ways that were both clear and unavoidable, the tension breaks and Judas explodes. Clearly rattled, obviously not thinking straight, perhaps even shamed to the point of rage at the suggestion that Jesus would die, and the knowledge in him that implied he would therefore do his worst, Judas lashes out at Mary, babbling about the budget and about how the money could have been better spent. So typical of the disciples and of us all, I think. This skipping over the too hard truth of what is actually happening by focusing on less essential and peripheral details. I mean, is this any time to be thinking about money? Jesus was being actively tracked down and hunted and spied on, and instead of running or hiding, he's instead insisting on walking unarmed and unprotected right into the heart of the place where the danger lay. It was, indisputably at this point, the beginning of the end, the start of the final chapter of his too short life, and of them all, only Mary seemed able to acknowledge it, which is to say, only Mary seemed able to accept it. Unlike Peter before her, she doesn't argue with Jesus, trying to get him to change his mind, begging him to please, please stay with them. And unlike almost all the male disciples, she doesn't slip into denial either, or into the kind of willed confusion that seemed to take over in times of real stress or fear. Instead, somehow, Mary was able to really trust Jesus, leaning in towards him, always, listening harder and more deeply, always, struggling to follow right up close behind him, always, even when she didn't understand. And now, this evening, while the others were still distracting themselves from their totally understandable fear by arguing about this or that, she alone keeps focused on what was actually going on and bathes her dear friend and teacher and Lord with funeral oils, pouring them out with as much generosity and abandon as Jesus himself would soon pour himself out on the cross. Perhaps alone in that room, Mary seems able to perceive the new thing that Jesus is about to do and is in fact already doing. And more than this, she echoes that new thing herself through her own willing outpouring of love, doing all she can to honor and thank and perhaps even strengthen Jesus for the dreadful, beautiful work of love that was his and his alone to do. Of course, from a practical point of view, there wasn't much Mary could do beyond daring to actually turn towards him that night, beyond making room for him just as he was, beyond abiding with him at his feet, listening to his words and absorbing his presence and honoring him. She'd been with him in grief and anger, celebration and joy. She'd been with him as the crowds grew and as everyone in the world, it seemed, wanted to be with him, and she was still with him now that the crowds had turned, and even having him in her house exposed her and her family to mortal danger. She may have been only a woman. She may have had little status or power or say over even the minutest of things, but alone among those who were with Jesus that night, Mary got it. She got it all. The beauty, the love, the faithfulness, the terror, and the death to come. And still she stayed. She didn't speak because, well, what words could possibly have contained all she wanted to say, all she feared to say, all she longed to say? So instead she took a whole pound of rare and expensive oil used to bury folks with, and poured not a drop or two onto Jesus' feet, but the whole jar, down to the very last drop, saving nothing for herself, holding nothing back. And then she washed and wiped those same sacred, soon-to-be-scarred feet with her hair. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. This new thing is what began that night as Jesus made a way in the wilderness by willingly walking right into its heart. And this new thing is what Mary alone was able to honor that night, what she let herself see, what she feared as much as everyone else, I'm sure, but what she was able to surrender to nonetheless, thereby joining herself with Jesus so closely that her very actions became an extension of his own. He poured out with love and abandon, not counting the cost. She poured out with love and abandon, not counting the cost. And so the question for me today, and perhaps for all of us, is who else could offer a better model of discipleship today as we also seek to accompany Jesus on the way to the cross? Not during these sacred upcoming days of Holy Week only, of course, but day after day, week after week, month after month, during these terrible times in our country when so many people are being chased and tracked and hunted and taken. Mahmoud Khalil, Rumisa Ozturk, Adalberto Herrera, Arturo Suarez Trejo, Neri Alvarado, Abrego Garcia. These beloved children of God are all innocent of any traceable crimes and have all been spied on and tracked and hunted down and arrested and locked up nonetheless. Some are right now in Louisiana, some in Texas. 2 are brilliant intellectuals. 1 is just 17. He was picked up on his way to his very first day of work. And 3 are right now in the terrible prison known as the Center for Terrorism Confinement in El Salvador, with no access to any system of justice at all. None. And they are, of course, just 6 of the thousands of adults and children who are being terrorized and arrested and deported or locked up right now across our country in ICE detention units and in El Salvador and in Guantanamo. And in the face of this, what do we all, or at least many of us, or at least I, too often do? Well, like Jesus' friends and disciples, many of us succumb to the depth of our powerlessness and the overwhelm of our stress and the tension of our fear and grief, and in response, we find ways to distract ourselves, just like the disciples did that night. Maybe we argue with others over this or that, or switch off and zone out, refusing to focus on the reality around us because it's just too painful, just too much. And this is where Mary comes in. Wonderful, faithful, powerless, layabout Mary, who turns towards instead of away, even when the story that is unfolding around her is more painful than she can possibly bear. Against her better judgment, perhaps, she turns towards the suffering, even at a time of crisis, and seeks to learn even then, and to grow even then, and to love even then, and to offer herself, however paltry that offering must have felt, however insufficient, even then. And this was her new thing, springing forth, making a way in the wilderness and a river in the desert, because what she did was love. Even in the face of fear and overwhelm and grief so big it threatened to swamp her, she dared to love. Which is what Jesus did too, right? He in his way, she in hers. And in that love, they became one. And surely both were accompanied then, and both upheld, and both filled and strengthened for whatever might come next. So, with help from the wonderful people here at St. John's, I've made for you all little prayer cards, little icons really, images of the divine as expressed through the faces of Mahmoud, Rumisa, Jose, Arturo, Neri, and Abrego. You'll find them in your bulletin, and I hope you will take yours home with you, and then, in imitation of Mary, dare to turn towards the person there and sit with them in quietness for a few minutes each day until Easter, opening your heart in the safety of your own home to the humanity and blessed worth of the person in front of you, and to the depth of horror of what is being done to them, and to the power of love that holds them all and us all, and that can today and tomorrow and the next day only be expressed through you, through the breaking open of your heart and the pouring out of your love, and then the action it will lead you to, whatever that may be. Spend a little intimate time with one of these 6 people each day, through the image you have chosen, through the icon, and so spend time with Christ. It will lead you to heartbreak, for sure, but it will also lead you to life and to hope and to action, because that's just what love does every time. It springs forth from our hearts like a spring of living water and makes a way in the wilderness and a river in the desert. May it be so for each one of you. May it be so.